Welcome to Mulch, the podcast for flower farmers who love growing beautiful things and want to build a business that lasts. I'm your host, Rebecca Anning-Brown from Silver Grey Foliage in Yorkshire, and every week we'll get real about what it takes to grow flowers for a living, from the planning and the planting to the mindset and the money. Whether you're just starting out or a few seasons in, you'll find honest conversations and practical ideas to help you to root your business in firm soil. Thank you for listening. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. It really will help more flower farmers to get on and grow. Let's dig in. Hello and welcome back to Mulch. I'm so excited to say that today is episode 60 of the podcast. And this week we celebrated 15,000 downloads. For me, this is huge. It's a marker of perseverance with something that came out of a place of challenge and a real intention to stay present and engaged with the flower farming community. So for those of you who don't know, the reason that I started Mulch was that I used to write a newsletter to flower farmers religiously every week. A few years ago, my ability to write dropped off an edge for no apparent reason, and I found this hard. But I retained the ability to speak and to talk to people, so I started the Mulch podcast as a means of communicating with you and to continue to be in good company. If you're listening and you want to celebrate a podcast designed for building flower farming businesses that are really rooted in success, then I would love it if you would follow the links to the show notes and buy me a coffee. There's always a cup of black coffee sat on my desk, hot or cold, as I record a podcast and do my work, and I'd be so grateful. Thank you. A brief update on the weather, obviously. It's mainly drier here in Leeds, which is incredible. The soil in our field is currently a perfect, cool, slightly damp temperature, which is perfect for planting into. And yesterday, as I worked, I even took off my cardigan for a few brave moments in the sunshine. Who'd have thought? Wow, it felt so good. In today's episode, we're talking about pests, but really we're talking about resilience, because how we respond to pressure in our growing environments tells us a lot about how resilient our flower farm actually is. As growers, we love to talk about pests as much as we love to moan about the weather. This episode is inspired by an unintentional pest that's been introduced into our household. They're called the ginger tiger and queen sweet pea, and they're our kittens. They've got a completely unreasonable love of digging. I literally can't tell you how much damage they've caused in my garden, where we have tunnels and beds in our greenhouse for all the spring flowers. It's been a little bit of a nightmare. I also can't promise you that I've been measured in my response every time I've found a new reference to their presence in my garden. So, given the heartache that these kittens have caused in my world, I've really been forced to reflect on the reason that they are there, which is that I invited the cats into our home, into our world. So they have an impact and I have to learn to work with them. The reality is that as sustainable flower growers, we often invite some of the animals and insects that we consider to be pests into our spaces by placing in their paths things of interest that otherwise would not have been there. So as the season starts, this episode is designed to help you to think about the layers of resilience that we can put in place so that our businesses are less impacted by the pests without having to reach for pesticides, pistols, or polishing off a bottle of wine. Okay, layer number one is protection. So the first pest that we'll all be talking about, is the green fly. The thing that I really hate about green flies is how quickly they multiply and how quickly they appear, because often once they're noticeable, even if you're really vigilant, the problem is bigger than you thought. Like most of you, I use a lot of protection in the form of low tunnels on our flower farm. The main reason on our flower farm that we do that is to protect against rabbits that love to dig up our new plants as they're getting established. We use the low tunnels, mainly made from Enviromesh, to prevent that digging up rather than them being nibbled at whilst plants are establishing, and then we take off the netting. The real challenge of protection is being brave enough to take it off, because it's often the protection that harbours the green flies and makes it harder to step in early enough. Protection also makes it harder for predators to get at the green flies. So now, some of you might be thinking, well, that's actually not the reason that I use protection, Rebecca. I use protection to bring the crops on earlier so that I have flowers sooner to sell to my customers. And low tunnels will achieve this for you. However, I'd love you to ask yourself the question whether you genuinely reap the benefits of an earlier crop if the green fly become an issue before they're noticed. So that's P number 1. Carefully consider the need for protection and how early you can bear to remove it in order to support you to have the flower quality that you need. Layer number 2 is pungent smells. I've talked about this one before. It's my theory on the smelly belt. In this approach, I use scented, cuttable plants to deter pests. Herbs work really well for this, as do annuals like calendula and annual phlox. Non-flowery, stinky options are also pretty good. So I'm thinking about garlic and chilli specifically. The garlic is supposed to work really, really well for green flies and also red spider mite. So that's worth considering it inside your greenhouses and tunnels. Speaking of which, Deborah, who's part of the Grow Club membership, brought garlic bombs up in a conversation the other day. I'd never heard of them, so I gave them a bit of a look and a bit of research. They're essentially a non-pesticide smoke bomb that won't kill your plants, meaning that you can use them in tunnels and completely occlusive spaces like greenhouses at any time of the year to kill off red spider mite, green flies, black flies, and all those kind of buggy things. I love the idea of using something that's safe for the environment and also safe for my plants. But I do think that they still come with a health warning that's worth paying attention to as sustainable growers. And that is this. Any form of smoke bomb, including a garlic one, is non-selective. And that means that it will work by suffocation of anything that's in its path. This includes the good things like ladybirds and pollinators, which is obviously bad. A safer option if you're wanting to use garlic would be garlic granules or a garlic solution. We personally use a garlic granules. So layer number 2, when you're thinking about pest prevention, pest invitation, is pungence. Layer number 3, it's the prickly barrier. So I came across the prickly belt, the prickly barrier option in the first year that we grew perennial scabious, which is one of my all-time favourite flowers. I love the perennial scabious in white and that lilac-y bluey colour that we get. They were growing in a bed next to Eryngium and quite difficult to cut. I didn't mind the prickles, and it wasn't causing me too much trouble other than the occasional scratch across my back and arm, which really, with nettles in our field, happens anyway. And then one week I did a massive cut of the Eryngium for a florist, and then I did some for drying as well. I was really grateful to make it a little bit easier to cut, a little bit quicker to cut rather than easier, until I came back to the field. and the deer had promptly munched the tops of my flowers. Every flower head in 3 beds had completely disappeared overnight because I'd made it easier for the deer to access my flowers. I cried proper tears, but I also learned about what deer don't like, which amongst other things is prickly plants. So we grow eryngium, and I also allow nettles and other prickly plants to become overgrown around the flowers that I particularly want to spare from the deer's hungry bellies. And that's roses, perennial scabious, hydrangea, to name but a few. So layer number 3 is most definitely the prickly barrier. Right, moving on. Layer number 4, when we're thinking about resilience against pests, is ponds. Now, this is something that is still on my to-do list. I really do want a pond in our flower farm. Now, obviously, my farmer thinks that I'm totally bonkers and this is an ongoing conversation, but it will be so effective when I do finally convince him that this is the way forward. Every flower farm needs a pond, and I think the importance of this was made clear to me by Paula from Mill Pond Flower Farm. Ponds bring frogs and toads and hoverflies and dragonflies and essentially tons of predators for slugs and tiny bugs. I desperately want a pond on my flower farm for the benefit to our ecosystem, and also because dragonflies really are one of the most beautiful creatures ever to have been invented. I love watching them on a summer's day, just kind of hovering and flapping and iridescent. They're gorgeous. Layer number 5 of our resilience against pests is patience. This is a hard one. I often think that as flower farmers, we can be a little bit like Veruca's salt from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. We want everything and we want it now. This just isn't the way that it works, unless you happen to be growing your flower farm on a nature reserve. And if you are, please invite me to grow next door to you. For me, the best example of the need to be patient is small birds. We've always had red kites and kestrels hunting over our field. But what I really wanted was the small birds to eat the small bugs and the slugs. And they arrived last year, 7 years into our growing journey. It took time because our farm began on open pasture land with no trees. We set the structure of the field first and started adding trees once we knew that we were going to stay. And then it took what felt like 10 lifetimes for the small birds to realise that they were welcome and there was a place for them to stay and play. This is just how ecosystems happen. They happen over time with patience, and nature, real nature, won't be rushed. Sustainable flower farming isn't about eliminating pests. It's about building systems strong enough to absorb them. So, as you head into 2026, remember that pests are not a sign that you're failing. They're a sign that you're growing something that's worth eating. The aim isn't to eliminate every problem. It's to build resilient layers so that your customers can buy the highest quality and the highest volume of flowers from you. So put in the layers that will create this quality as early as possible. Protection where you need it, remove it when you don't. Pungent borders, prickly barriers, water for balance, and above all, patience. And when the kittens start digging up your seedlings and your ranunculus and your anemone, take a breath. We're all learning. I'll be back next week with another episode of Mulch, encouraging you, as ever, to get on and grow. Rebecca.
Thank you for listening to Mulch today. Don't forget to subscribe and to share the podcast with your flower farming friends. I'll be back next week, helping you to firm your flower farming roots with real and practical flower farming insights and advice. Rebecca.